We're here today again with New York State Supreme Court Judge Barry Kramer, who is, of course, a living basketball legend. And Barry, thank you and welcome.
Great to be here, Rene. Thank you.
Barry, in your first interview with Bob Pisano, you talked about your formative years in basketball and playing for Linton and then at NYU. And now the world changes because you're a first-round NBA draft pick. Where were you that day when you got drafted, and what did it feel like?
Well, I was thrilled to be drafted, and I was thrilled to be drafted in the first round, which actually surprised me because I had a poor senior year. I didn't play well. I scored 21 points a game, but I did not play well, not up to the same standards of the previous year. So for me, but I had heard that the Warriors may draft me, and they had the 8th pick in the first round. I did know for a certainty that had they not, perhaps the Celtics would have taken me as the 9th pick in the first round, and had they not, the Knicks were definitely going to take me as the first pick in the second round, which is very interesting because that's where they got Willis Reed.
That's right.
That's an amazing thing, and Willis Reed, one of the greatest players of all time. But yeah, to be drafted after not having such a great year was really a bit of a surprise to me.
Well, truth be told, your senior year you were hampered by an ankle injury, so it wasn't a reflection of your play. It was more of an injury situation.
No, I made a big mistake, Rene, by playing that year. I should have never played. I wasn't ready to play. They could have sat me out the year and come back for another year of eligibility. But what happens in those situations is your teammates are all pushing you. Come and play. We're opening Cornell in a week. Please, we need you. Come and play. You have all these pressures on you. And it's not like today. You're not thinking, well, you know what? I got to protect myself because I could get $1 million NBA contract. Don't forget, the NBA was only 9 teams. There was no money. And so the money was little or nothing. And so my thoughts were I wanted to play with my teammates, but I was not physically ready.
As a first-round NBA pick, what was your first contract? For how much?
$13,500.
Wow, amazing. And Wilt Chamberlain was a teammate?
Yes, he was. I got to meet Wilt in San Francisco. Great guy. I loved him. He was so good to me. I thought I was going to go with him. He was traded to Philadelphia midway through the year. He told me on an airplane that I was going to be part of that trade, and somehow it didn't happen. I didn't go. I don't know why to this day. Dolph Schayes was coaching Philly, and I've asked him, and he doesn't remember. Dolph is getting older now, and he actually did not remember when I last saw him. But Wilt was a wonderful guy, and to me, one of the 2-3 greatest players who ever lived.
Excellent.
Yeah,
what was he like off the court in the locker room? Did you have great conversation with him? Was he an affable kind of guy?
Wilt was a wonderful guy. He was a gentle giant. He was a great guy. I won't say the same about a lot of my teammates out there. There were some tough guys out there. And everybody fights for a job, so it gets very, very difficult. But I wasn't competing with Wilt, and he was wonderful to me. And even on the road, sometimes I ate with him. I did sit with him very often on the plane. Wilt was a guy who was a little self-conscious. He was self-conscious of his height. He was a stutterer. He stuttered. I was always very patient with him. I wanted to hear what he had to say. And he and I were friends.
And in a strange twist of fate, you end up getting to play for your hometown New York Knicks on your college home court for NYU. What was it like the first time you suited up with the Knicks?
That was great. I was so glad to come back to New York. I did not like it out there in San Francisco. Didn't play much. Coach's name was Alex Hannum. Didn't see me as a part of that team. They had come in second the year before, lost in the finals to the Celtics. He stayed pat with what he had. Didn't play me, and I was so glad to get back to New York and in my familiar surroundings. And it was a thrill. Our first game was against the Boston Celtics, as a matter of fact, and I got in the game, and the crowd was chanting for me. They were chanting for me to get in the game. Coach was named Harry Gallatin. My father and mother were there, and finally put me in the game. Got a big cheer. It was great to be home.
Excellent, excellent. And we know you had a big cheering section, both while you were at NYU and from Capital District people that went down to see you play.
Oh, yeah.
So playing at the Garden was probably a resurgence for you.
It was a resurgence for me because it was a familiarity, and I was comfortable there. The Knicks were a younger team, which was very helpful to me. Willis Reed was a rookie. Butch Comives, Howard Comives was a rookie. Emmett Bryant was a rookie. Art Heyman was a second-year player. A lot of young players on that team, so it was a better fit for me, and I got to play more, and I was glad to be there.
And one of the good things that we was able to do was to find a copy of a game that you played against Oscar Robertson, who played for the Cincinnati Royals. Peter Vesey from the Post was able to send us a copy of that game on a DVD, and you got to see yourself play in that game for the first time in many years, and you actually outplayed Oscar that evening. And actually, I watched the game several times, and not only did you outplay him offensively, but you shut him down defensively too.
That was the best game I played in the NBA, and it was one of these games where the Knicks had not beaten the Cincinnati Royals in years, and they won, and it was a big win for the Knicks, and got a lot of headlines the next day. But interestingly enough, as I watched the tape, the thing about sports is that confidence is a big factor in how you play. And even though I played well in that game, I still had lost a lot of confidence. Watching myself, I could see my jump shot went from on high. I was in front of my face because I was sort of guiding the ball. Because when you start to miss and you lose your confidence, you start to try too hard. And so I played well, but it still wasn't the old Barry Kramer, but it was still pretty good.
And you told me that you were able to shut Oscar down by staying in front of him, by denying him the basket.
I tried to keep the ball out of his hands because if anybody ever watched Oscar play so many years ago, he was a tremendous player. But he controlled the ball. And he needed the ball in his hands, and I did. I tried to deny him the ball. I picked him up full court. I pressured him. I was a perfect matchup for him. I was about the same size as he was. And in that particular game, he did give the ball up. But I will say this. I think in looking back that he was tired. I've never seen him play quite that way. He gave the ball up, let others do things with it, which I've never seen him do. So perhaps he was tired, whatever reason. He didn't score much and did not have a good game.
Well, that could have been because you denied him the ball and shut
I
him
had
down.
a little something to do with it, I would say that.
So after that season ended, you had a tough decision to make with your career.
Yes.
And decided, with the blessing of your wife, Pat, to attend law school and become an attorney.
Yes.
And an extremely, very successful New York State judge and now Supreme Court judge. What was it like to make that decision to walk away from the NBA?
It was a very difficult decision, a decision that I had to live with for many years while I was still young enough to play ball, and watching it on TV and wishing that I was there. My father wanted me to play and continue on. The Knicks sent me a contract for the second year for $15,500. I still have it, as a matter of fact. I should show it to you. You could put it in your
Hall of Fame.
Your Hall of Fame. And so they thought that I was kidding them when I told them I wasn't coming back. I was going to go to law school. Eddie Donovan, then the general manager, said, "Get down here, we're not paying you anymore." And I said, "No, I'm not going to come back." And so I was placed on the Knick retired list. They were shocked I didn't return. And in my back of my mind, I always thought that I might come back and play, and I almost did. But as it turned out, I got to play for the Wedekind Pros and the Schaefer Brewers, and had a chance to play basketball at a high level again.
Now, what's interesting about that, Barry, is that you mentioned the Wedekinds and the Schaefer Brewers, but local businessman Al DeSantis put together a team, and what a team it was. The roster of players. Why don't you tell us about who was on the team?
Well, it was amazing. I was telling Bobby Pisano before this started today that I never heard Dave Blow's name. Actually, it turns out I did, but I didn't remember it. Chuck Richards, who later played with us with the Brewers, was a friend of his. He played for Syracuse. Told me about Dave, but I didn't recollect. And I was being told that at tryouts for the Wedekind Pros, that Dave was this unbelievable talent. I said, how can that be? He played for Cortland State. How good can he be? And then finally, after being convinced to go and to play and to give it a try, I went over to Bishop Gibbons for a practice, and I first saw him, and he was everything they said he was. Amazing talent, amazing shooter, amazing athlete, amazing player.
And of course, you had Bill Tulaski.
Oh, Bill Tulaski, yes. Bill Tulaski, I'd watched him before play, and to tell you the truth, I was a little frightened of him. He was a tough competitor. I always say took a backseat to no one, wanted to win, and he was there. Dave Blow was there. Bill Tulaski was there, who I'd never played with before. Joe Geiger was there from Catholic High. Armand Rio was there, who was from Catholic High, who I played against at Notre Dame. Geiger I played against against Catholic Central when he was in high school. I think Jim Zulo may have been there. I can't remember. I don't know if Phil Schaff was there at that time. Phil Schaff, one of the greatest players I ever played with in that era, was from St. Johnsville and may not have been recruited at that in those early years.
So it was safe to say that probably the best local amateur players available on the same team.
It was amazing. It was what you would call almost an act of God. You know, not to be blasphemous, but a convergence of events of great college players who happened to live in the Capital District at that time, all of whom had been the stars for their respective, not just high school, but college teams right here. Amazing.
And what was also amazing is that at the time, the greatest current college players in the country would come and play your team in the summertime. Artis Gilmore, Cazzie Russell.
Started with Elvin Hayes, you know.
Elvin Hayes, the great Houston star.
People forget about Elvin Hayes. He was one of the great players of all time. How Al DeSantis was, I think you would be a tremendous promoter. Obviously, the way you built up the Capital District Hall of Fame, you have the same talents as Al. Al was a guy who got out there with the people. If he needed to get Elvin Hayes here, he went to Houston. And he met Elvin, and Elvin got to like him, and then he got Elvin back here. And that's how it started. Elvin Hayes came first, Al got him here, and then every great player of that era, from Elvin Hayes to Jimmy Walker at Providence. Jalen Rose is his son, by the way.
Dave Bing.
And I don't even think, Dave Bing came here, Cazzie came here, Julius Irving came here, Artis Gilmore came here. I can't even remember them all. It was amazing. Al DeSantis got them. Dave Cowens came here. Amazing.
And talent. You won most of those games.
We did beat many of those teams. We did win many of those games. They could not believe that there was. I've talked to Elvin about it on other occasions when he came back. Could not believe the level of talent that was here.
The game against Artis Gilmore, I think that he was 7'2", and did he tip a ball in at the buzzer? For his team
he dunked it at the buzzer over Hawthorne Wingo, who played for the Knicks later. We called him Wingo Hawthorne. That's funny, you know. Howard Davis, who owned the Harlem Wizards, had this kid playing for him. He called him Wingo Hawthorne. He was only 17. I think he hoped that he would keep his amateur status. Everyone was getting paid, that he could someday go to college. Does he really think he was fooling people calling him Wingo Hawthorne instead of Hawthorne Wingo? I don't think so, but he was a good player.
And how about there was a game when you actually beat Cazzie Russell's team. Cazzie apparently missed a dunk, and he hit the back iron, and the ball went out to half court.
Yes, that's true. And Bob DeLuca hit the winning shot. That was in Mechanicville. And Bob DeLuca had never played with us before. And he was obviously a great player, you know, all-star from Cornell and all Ivy League. And he hit the winning shot, and we beat that team. Cazzie was so mad. The next night we played him at Linton. Kazi came storming through. The locker rooms were adjoining, and Kazi came storming through. He had to get something, and I tried to speak to him. He wouldn't talk to me. He was all business. They wanted to win that game. Yeah. That was the AAU team. That was the team that won the AAU championship that Kazi was playing with his college players and other great players from around the country. I'm talking great players. Ollie Johnson from San Francisco, 6'10". Dory Murray, 6'10" from Detroit. Kazi Russell, Oliver Darden, 6'8", 9. I mean, it's an unbelievable team. We beat them. Amazing.
That's just amazing. Jim Zullo, who played guard on one of your teams, told me that your team was a very high-scoring team, and you had decided in the locker room before the game that you would try and score 200 points in the game. And he said that during the game, the score at halftime was 110 to 84. You were ahead. And I said the final score was 163 to 120. And I said, Jim, what happened? He goes, we just got tired. He said you only had 6 players suit up in the game. And he said but we couldn't miss. We just got tired.
It was a team that didn't have a lot of size, but had the greatest shooters that I've ever played with. I mean, I wish you could have seen it. Blow was an uncanny shooter. Tulaski was a great shooter. Curvin was a great shooter. Geiger was a great shooter, and Rio was a great corner shooter. I'm talking shooting from 20 feet and out. Yeah. And teams would come in, and these big guys and all these great players would not anticipate that every one of these guys could stick it from 22 feet. It was incredible. So that's what the difference was. The shock and awe of it, that everyone could shoot the ball. And so, yeah, we scored a lot of points.
It's amazing that even in today's NBA games, teams struggle to score 90 points, and your semi-pro team scored 140, 150 points a game. Amazing.
The game is different today in this respect. The three-point shot has changed the game. People have become specialists who play now, who like to shoot the three or like to take it all the way to the hoop. The middle distance game has sort of disappeared at both the college and the pro level. And I think the three-point shot has done that. You saw more of, if you go back to the Jerry West era, the guys who took it off the dribble, hit on a 2-footed stop, went up and shot the jump shot. You don't see that today as much. So it's a different game. But all the people on my team, on the Schaefer Brewers in those days, the Wiedeking Motors Pros, could shoot the middle distance shot.
Barry. Barry, it was amazing. I remember talking to your son Brian one day, and Brian told me the story about how you were at the Garden and you were Dean Smith was approaching, and Brian said, Daddy, look, it's Dean Smith. And he walked up and said, Barry, how are you? And shook your hand. And your son stood there just amazed that he knew you first name on a personal basis.
Brian said, Dad, you know Dean Smith?
Barry, tell us about the day that they approached Al DeSantis and offered a young player to play forward on your team, and what Al said.
Well, you know, that team that came with Artis Gilmore, what a team that was, by the way. Artis Gilmore, Austin Carr. Austin Carr played on that team, one of the greatest players in Notre Dame history. Sid Catlett was a 6'9" teammate, played in the NBA, came with Austin Carr. Charlie Yelverton, who Digger Phelps coached at Fordham. He was a great player, All-American, tremendous player. Shut me down a little bit in that game. A 6'4" guy, could really defend. It was a tremendous player. But also on that team was Dr. J, Julius Erving. Of course, we had never heard about him. He was a young kid coming out of Massachusetts and an unknown. But before the game, they had so many players and so much talent and so much size that the promoter who brought that team here offered our promoter, our owner, Al DeSantis, to give us one of their players. And the player he offered was the player he knew the least about, Julius Erving. He says, I'll give you this guy, Erving, sort of equalize the size here and make a better game of this. And Al's response was, what do I need Erving for? I've got Rio and Geiger. And so we didn't take Erving. He played against us. And oh my God, he dunked a couple from half court. And I remember thinking to myself, where did this person come from? Because physically, I had never seen a person able to do the things that he could do. And of course, he had a hand that was twice the size of mine, hold the ball like it was an orange. And so we had to play against him. He didn't play with us, unfortunately.
Barry, I heard a story once about someone who saw you play that said that you were on the going in and you almost dunked over a 7-foot player, but just literally laid the ball in over him, and that you were a solid foot above the basket, above the rim.
That was the play. It's a play that I'll never forget, if it's what Bobby Weaver might have seen, because Bobby Weaver was down there in the Garden, saw the Illinois game when I scored the 42. They had a kid from Boys High named Bill Burwell. He was 7 feet tall. His teammate was Connie Hawkins, but he had gone to a year earlier to college. So he was a senior when I was a junior. Hawkins would have been a junior at Iowa, but he got in trouble and he wasn't playing. Burwell was a force. He was a tremendous player, and he was 7 feet tall. In that game, it's funny. I remember it like yesterday. They were doubling, tripling me, but whatever. I was out on the perimeter, directly beyond the top of the key, and the fella guarding me went to make a steal. He went to steal the ball, and he went by me, and the pass got to me, and there was an open lane from me directly to the basket. And so I went. My adrenaline was pumping. Burwell was right there in front of the hoop. I literally jumped over him. I jumped up over him, and he tried to block it. He was here, I was there, and I dropped it. I probably was a foot and a half over the basket. Amazing. And after that play, from that time on, he was not even a factor defensively. I took it baseline. I took it anywhere. He was a little intimidated. He looked at me at that point. I don't know why I jumped so high. Probably never jumps that high again in my life. But I went over the top of him. That was unbelievable. So something that's, listen, I'm 70 years old. That happened when I was 20, and I remember it like yesterday.
Wow, amazing. Barry, what's also amazing is that those Wiedekind and Schaefer Brewer teams sort of paved the way for the Albany Patroons, who were lucky enough to have Phil Jackson begin his coaching career, George Karl begin his coaching career, Bill Musselman, and had some great players. Amazing. And so you paved the way for another great semi-pro team that made a name for many years in Albany in the Capital District. And it's unfortunate that we don't have that today, but what great memories.
It was great. I went to those games in the Armory. It was amazing. Can you imagine Phil Jackson coaching here? Can you imagine George Karl coaching? It was amazing. The Patroons were a stepping stone for them. Phil Jackson, with all due respect to Pat Riley, who's one of the greatest NBA coaches, I think Phil Jackson's the greatest coach who ever lived. I would love him to be able to come back, but I think physically he's unable to coach again. But he started here. And he was a great player, too, for the Knicks. He was a tremendous talent. But the Patroons were fun to watch. The excitement in the Armory was something about the people sitting right courtside, right on the court, was kind of like playing in the Palestra in Philadelphia. The electricity was tremendous.
And at the Palestra in Philadelphia, still today, there's a full-length, huge body shot of you on the wall.
I have yet to see it. I've got to go there. I had some great games in the Palestra, and I loved that place. I loved it for the reasons I said. The excitement was second to none. It was a great... Can you imagine they're still playing there? That's on the campus of the University of Pennsylvania, and they're still playing there. Correct. Amazing.
Yeah. Now, Barry, in the NBA, there were 9 teams at the time. Where were some of the places that you liked to play or didn't like to play? Teams that you liked to play against? Or for?
Well, playing with Wilt, the greatest team to play against in those days, and the greatest team in the league was Boston. And Wilt was a great, great player, but Bill Russell used to psych Wilt a little bit. Bill Russell used really psychology on Wilt. He humored him. He never made him mad. It's kind of reminds me of the Indiana Pacers making LeBron James mad. There's certain giants you don't want to wake them up, and Bill Russell never woke Wilt up. He always humored Wilt. He always was his friend when he played against him, and he was always able to beat him. But Wilt truly was the better player, the better athlete, the better player. That was a fun place to play. The places I did not enjoy playing, I loved to play in the Garden. That was great. Cities that closed up early at night. When we would go to play in St. Louis, there was no downtown. Nothing. It was. I think there might have even been a curfew. You couldn't. Everything was closed down. When you went to Detroit, same thing. Played in Cobo Hall at the end of the downtown section. Nothing open, nothing available. Same thing in St. Louis with Kiel Auditorium. There were not many teams. Cincinnati was a fun city to go to because it was a small town, big town atmosphere, and I had friends in Cincinnati. So certain cities I enjoyed traveling to, something to do, people to talk to, and other cities were not as enjoyable.
Do you wonder what it would have been like had you stayed?
Oh, I dreamt about it for years. I realized later that I gave up perhaps a talent that I had and didn't pursue it to its fullest, and that always troubled me. The problem with life is you can't do everything. I would have liked to prove how good I could have been. It wasn't meant to be, and so I eventually learned to live with it.
Right. But I think, upon reflection, those games with the Brewers and Wiedekins where you got to play against the best players in the country certainly distinguished yourself on yet another level.
Well, I think that it's what motivated me to some degree. It was my chance. While people said, Barry Kramer didn't make it, he played a year, he's out of the league. It was my chance to show that I could play with the great ones. And so I tried hard and tried my best, and those were fun years for me.
If you were a first-round NBA pick today, draft pick, and they offered you $3 million, would you stay?
I think you'd have to stay. I think what happens, I had other goals I wanted to achieve in life, but what happens is money is very important. Let's not discount it. And you're at any job, you're only going to make a certain amount of money in your lifetime.
Right.
And so you could you could really give a lot of security for your family, do something you love to do. I think with the big money, there's no doubt I would have played for probably a long time.
The game has changed a lot, and like you said, the mid-range game has sort of evaporated. And that's something you excelled at, and probably like no other. And you would have been a great player had you stayed. Havlicek, Jack Barron, Van Arsdale's, Bill Bradley to some degree. That was the kind of player you were, so you would have been right in that system.
I think you're right. I was an in-between size guy who probably could have played in the same category as those guys.
And they actually have those now in the NBA with Jimmer Fredette, who's a local Glens Falls player.
That's right.
Who is sort of a guard, kind of a 2-3 player. And a great scorer.
Great scorer. And I hear Keith Smart is gone, and maybe that bodes well for Jimmer.
We sure hope so.
Okay.
Hope so. And really,
funny.
Barry, it's from the people I've talked to, you're known nationally, both from your career at NYU and the tournaments you played in and being an NBA player. And it's really an honor and a privilege to sit down with you and have you tell us about your career in the game. And certainly you're the greatest local basketball product ever in the history of upstate New York, and it's a real privilege to sit down and.
For you to say that, Rene, is really something for me. Thank you so much.
You were an inaugural member and voted the greatest player in our first annual Hall of Fame banquet, and well deserved.
I'm happy to be a part of your Capital District Hall of Fame, and I think that it's only going to get bigger and better as the years go by.
Thank you so much, Barry.
Thank you, Rene.